So we're in the tent with the mesmerist today, and we'll see what happens. Before I could do any more worrying, a curtain on the stage got whipped aside, and a tall, round white man in a long black cape was standing right in front of us. His eyes looked a whole lot more like a dead person's eyes than a live person's. They were blank and blue, and they appeared to be looking square at you, but you could tell they weren't really seeing a thing. A bevy of laughs and moans and screams came out of everyone that was jammed up in the tent. It ain't being fragile when I say that I was amongst the screamers. I grabbed a hold of the preacher's shirt sleeve and mashed my face into it. He just as quick snatched it away and said, "I told you you were going to watch this. You can learn about how a flim-flam works." I noticed my own arm was being held on too tight, and looked to see who grabbed me. A little white stranger boy, near about as old as me, was laughing and carrying on something wild. He swore, "Blang it all, this here's the fourth time I seen him, and I still near about jump out of my skin when he first comes on stage." He talked like he was from America. I said, "You saw him 4 times? Ain't you afeared of getting floated off?" He laughed and said, "Pshaw, he's just an old humbug. He can't float not in nowhere." The boy had a head of thick curly red hair and a nose that looked a whole lot like a bird's beak. His eyes were a scary gray and blue color, about the same as the sky afore a storm. He weren't nothing but a child, but the smell of cigar smoke came out of his mouth strong. I said, "He really can't float nothing away?" "Nah, watch what happens. What's your name?" "I'm Elijah." The boy looked like I cursed at him. "Elijah? You sure?" "Course I'm sure." "You live down in Buxton?" "Yes." "Well, I'm going to tell you something, Elijah. You best not tell no one from Chatham that's your name." "Why not?" "'Cause there's a rapscallion in Chatham what's already laid claim to that name, and he ain't the kind to be sharing nothing with no one. There was a boy up here whose name was Edward, and Elijah from Chatham didn't want no one else having their name even starting with the same first letter as his. So he made the boy change his name to Oddward. And Oddward's own ma and pa called him that now, 'cause they didn't want no trouble with the real Elijah. If I was yous, I'd find another name, 'cause Elijah from Chatham ain't going to be real happy about meeting you, particular not with you being a slave boy from Buxton." "I weren't never a slave. I was freeborn." "Don't matter. Just you be mindful of who you say that name to, Elijah from Chatham. Ain't to be trifled with. He already killed a full-grown Indian man, and didn't kill him with no knife or gun or sword. Killed him with one hand, his left one, and he ain't but 12 years old." Those words hadn't had no chance to sink in and good when the conjurer on stage came to life. He flung his arms to the sides and showed that under his black cape he was wearing a something blue that looked a powerful lot like a dress, with all sorts of shiny, sparkling, silvered stars and crescent moons. Why, it was pasted with as many moons as stars. And that don't make no sense. That don't make no sense at all. All the folks that were screaming and laughing a minute ago set up a mess of oohs and ahs that would have you believing they were seeing the real heathens, instead of a dress with sham stars and way too many moons stuck all over it. This little white boy dug his elbow into my ribs and said, "Keep a watch on his eyes." The most amazing thing happened. The conjurer's eyes rolled back in his head, and their place was took right away by another set of eyes. Only difference twixt them was that these two eyes were brown, and whilst the other one seemed staring and empty, these eyes were looking dead at you. And worst, weren't no doubt they were seeing you. I felt my legs commence shaking and grabbed a hold of the white boy so I wouldn't fall. He said, "Them first eyes is painted on with his lids. I was out back smoking a cigar with him and seen it myself." He ain't real at all." The conjurer was slow as anything, appearing hard at everyone in the crowd. With his eye, when his eyes hit him, some folks screamed, some folks laughed, some folks cried, and some folks peered to be dumbstruck. I ain't sure which group I was amongst, 'cause the fearing in me was too strong. The white boy said, "Watch this. I'm gonna have some fun here." When the man's eyes struck him, the boy stood bolt upright and his face froze stiff as a stone. I quick unloosened his arm so the conjuration wouldn't have the chance to jump off of him and onto me. The man pointed at the boy and called out, "You." The boy's eyes near bucked right out of his head. The conjure man's finger commenced crooking and bending in a way that got more screams and confusion to rise up from the crowd. The boy looked at me, his face unfroze for a second, and one of his gray eyes winked. Then, quick as anything, his face froze up again, looking all stupefied, and he started pushing his way through people and heading to the steps on the side of the stage. You'd thought the conjurer's finger was a magnet, and the boy was made out of iron fillings. When folks saw the spell he was under, they stepped aside like he was toting a bucket that was overflowing with the plague. He got up on stage and the conjurer waved his cape over the boy's head. He said, "Boy, do you know me?" The boy said, "No, sir. You're a perfect stranger." "Then we've never spoken." "No, sir. And I ain't never smoked no cigar with you behind the tent, neither." Some folks that didn't know how frightsome this was laughed, and the conjurer screamed out, "Silence! Do you not see that this boy is already under a spell and talking nonsense? Why, if I were to misdirect my attention away from him for merely one moment, he'd be in danger of remaining a babbling idiot like this for the rest of his life." The conjurer man talked like he came from England. Most folks got quiet like they were in church. The conjurer waved his cape over the boy's head again and said, "Look into my eyes. Look deeply into my eyes." The boy couldn't help himself. He looked at the conjurer, starting blinking first one eye, then the other, so one side of his set face you were seeing a live brown eye, and on the other side you were seeing a dead blue one. Then open both dead eyes at once, then both live ones by by and by your head was back to whirling, and you know this boy had been wrong, this conjurer was real. I snatched back a hold of the preacher's coat sleeve. The conjurer said, "Look even more deeply into my eyes." The boy's head started going back and forth fast like a pendulum in a clock that the weights fell off. Then his chin dropped down on his chest, and it appeared he was out cold, excepting he didn't fall into a heap. We'll stop there for today.